The silent streets of Fergus, a quiet town nestled in southern Ontario, was known for its scenic beauty, historic charm, and the calm waters of the Grand River flowing through its heart. Life in Fergus was slow-paced, suburban, and peaceful until the first body was found. It started with Amy Dwyer. A 28-year-old fitness enthusiast, Amy was last seen leaving the local gym, Pure Strength Fitness, around 8 p.m. She had a ritual of walking the scenic route home by the river, where the streets were quiet and the path dimly lit. It was a route she'd taken 1,000 times without concern. But on that fateful night, Amy never made it home. Her parents reported her missing the next morning when they found her bed still made, untouched. A massive search ensued, combing through the trails near the river and the wooded areas nearby. Days passed with no word. It wasn't until a week later that her body was discovered in a secluded spot by the river, bruised and lifeless. She had been strangled. Her phone was missing, her wallet still in her pocket. The shock of Amy's murder rippled through Fergus, a town where everyone knew everyone. Crime of this sort was unheard of, and panic quickly took hold. 3 weeks later, Lisa McAllister, a 32-year-old high school teacher, disappeared after a dinner date. She was last seen at a quaint Italian restaurant downtown. Her date said goodbye to her at the door, and she'd planned to take a short walk home, as her house was only a few blocks away. But Lisa never arrived home. The police found her car parked at the restaurant the next morning. Her phone had been turned off, and no one had seen her after she left the restaurant. It wasn't long before her body turned up, dumped behind an old abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. She, too, had been strangled, and the eerie similarities to Amy's case sent chills through the town. Fear began to seep into the hearts of Fergus's women. Streets that once felt safe now harbored an undercurrent of danger. Parents forbade their daughters from walking alone at night, and even men kept a closer watch on their wives, girlfriends, and sisters. Yet, life went on, and people hoped the nightmare would end. Rachel Morgan, a 22-year-old college student who lived in Fergus with her parents, was the third victim. She had been working late at the local library, studying for her finals. The streets were empty by the time she left, and the bright lights of her phone illuminated her face as she texted a friend, updating them on her progress. But Rachel never made it home. Her parents, expecting her around 11 p.m., started to worry when the clock hit midnight with no sign of her. Her body was found 3 days later, hidden in the dense brush behind a gas station off the main highway. Her murder, again by strangulation, mirrored the previous two cases. But this time, there was a difference. Her phone was left behind, but it was smashed beyond repair. The Fergus Police Department was small, unaccustomed to handling serial killers. Detectives Andrew Harper and Miles Green, the town's lead investigators, knew they were dealing with someone calculating, someone who was careful about leaving behind clues. Whoever was responsible knew the town's layout well and was targeting women who were alone in isolated spots. The victims were all young, professional women, and their murders were growing more brazen. Despite their efforts, Harper and Green had few leads. No witnesses, no DNA evidence, no suspicious strangers in town. It was as though the killer was a ghost, a phantom who disappeared into the darkness after every kill. The fourth victim, Jenna Lawson. Jenna Lawson was a 35-year-old real estate agent. She had shown a few houses earlier that day and was last seen leaving the grocery store late in the evening. Her car was found abandoned in the parking lot, the groceries still sitting in the back seat. The police knew, without a doubt, that the killer had struck again. A sense of dread enveloped the town. People stopped going out after dark. Women moved in groups, and many residents left Fergus temporarily, hoping the killer would be caught before he claimed another victim. The press descended on the town, bringing unwanted attention to its previously peaceful existence. Headlines like "Fergus in Fear" and "Silent Killer Stalks the Streets" painted a chilling picture of the town's new reality. For Harper and Green, the pressure was mounting. They organized late-night patrols and tried laying traps, with female officers posing as vulnerable targets. But the killer never took the bait. He was always one step ahead, careful to strike when no one was looking. Harper started losing sleep, haunted by the unsolved cases. His partner, Green, grew more frustrated with every dead end. The break in the case, it wasn't until a small mistake on the killer's part that Harper and Green finally got a break. After Jenna's murder, a witness came forward, a gas station attendant who had seen a man loitering near the back of the gas station the night Rachel Morgan's body was found. The man was wearing a hoodie, but the attendant remembered his face clearly when he had come in earlier to buy cigarettes. They pulled the security footage from the gas station and got a blurry but usable image. It wasn't much, but it was something. A few weeks later, another clue came in. A farmer who lived near where Jenna's body was found had noticed a white van parked by the side of the road. The farmer had jotted down part of the license plate number, thinking it was unusual for someone to be out there at that hour. With the partial license plate and the blurry image, the police started piecing things together. The van belonged to a man named Martin Shaw, a local mechanic who had lived in Fergus his entire life. He was in his early 40s, well-liked by the townspeople, and had never been in trouble with the law. He ran a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of town. No one had ever suspected him. Harper and Green quietly began surveilling Shaw, watching his every move. He was meticulous, going about his routine without a hint of suspicion. But when they finally obtained a warrant to search his property, they found damning evidence: a hidden compartment in his van with rope, gloves, and the missing phones of the victims. When Shaw was arrested, he remained calm, denying everything. But the evidence was too strong. During interrogation, his demeanor shifted, revealing a colder, more calculating side. He admitted to targeting women who he knew wouldn't be missed for a few hours. He'd stalked them, learning their routines, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The thrill for him was not just in the kill, but in watching the fear spread through the town. "I could have done more," Shaw said, a chilling smile spreading across his face as he stared at the detectives. The case was finally closed, but the scars left on Fergus ran deep. Harper and Green knew that even with Shaw behind bars, the town would never be the same again. The women of Fergus, who once walked the streets without a second thought, now carried the weight of those dark nights with them. Fergus, once known for its quiet beauty, was now infamous for the terrifying string of murders that haunted its streets. As Shaw sat in his prison cell, Fergus tried to move on, but the memory of the silent killer would forever linger in the town's shadows. I remember that evening clearly. My parents had left for a business trip, and since I had school, I was left in the care of my grandparents. They lived only a few blocks away, so it wasn't a big deal, but I always enjoyed staying with them. My grandpa had a large farm behind their house, and he worked the land every day with my Aunt Emily and her husband, Uncle Tom. Their kids, my cousins Lucas and Abby, were just a bit younger than me, 14 and 13. They were fun to hang out with, and since we all had the weekend off school, it promised to be a relaxing 2 days. The farm was huge, with rows of different crops: wheat, corn, apples, and all kinds of grains. Grandpa took great pride in the farm, and he'd worked it for as long as I could remember. The farm had 4 scarecrows set up at different points to keep birds away. They were old, worn figures, each one more weathered than the last. Grandpa had made them himself. One wore a floppy straw hat and a red flannel shirt stuffed with straw. Another had a tattered brown trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. The 2 others wore similar mismatched clothing with patches of cloth sewn onto their faces, button eyes, and straw sticking out of their arms and legs. Creepy as they were, they did their job. That day was fun. We spent most of the afternoon playing around the house and exploring the farm. Grandpa and Uncle Tom were busy harvesting apples, and we helped them out a bit before we got tired. Lucas and Abby suggested we play hide and seek, and for the rest of the evening, we were running around the property like we were little kids again. After dinner, everyone retired early. My grandparents, Aunt Emily, and Uncle Tom slept on the ground floor, while my cousins and I shared rooms on the first floor. I had my own room at the far end of the hallway. As the night settled, everything seemed peaceful. The house was quiet, and only the soft sounds of the wind blowing through the fields outside could be heard. I stayed up for a while longer, browsing on my laptop. Lucas and Abby had already fallen asleep in their room next to mine. I wasn't particularly tired, so I sat there, scrolling through videos and messaging my friends when suddenly a sharp thud hit the window. I froze for a moment. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possibilities. Was it just an animal? I tried to shake off the unease and ignored it. But then, another stone hit the window, this time harder, followed by another one. My heart raced. It was coming from the direction of the farm. I slowly approached the window, my palms sweaty. I peeked through the curtain, trying to see who or what was out there. My eyes scanned the dark, moonlit fields, but I didn't see anyone at first. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I blinked, trying to focus. Two of the scarecrows, the ones closest to the house, were moving. I could see them swaying from side to side. Their arms waving in my direction as if they were trying to get my attention. My breath caught in my throat. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. Scarecrows don't move. They're just lifeless things made of straw. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but those waving arms, the way they seemed to turn toward me, it was all too real. I ran out of my room, desperate to wake up Lucas and Abby. I crept into their room and gently shook Lucas. He groaned but didn't wake up. Abby was curled up under her blankets, fast asleep. They were out cold, probably from all the running around we did earlier. I stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. Maybe it was better not to scare them. I went back to my room, cautiously peeking through the window again. The scarecrows were still standing, but now they were in different positions. One had shifted closer to the house, and the other had raised its arm higher, almost as if it was pointing at me. My stomach churned with fear. I had no explanation for what I was seeing. I knew I had to do something. I ran downstairs to get help. I knocked on Aunt Emily and Uncle Tom's door, but there was no answer. I knocked harder, my knuckles bruising against the wood, but still nothing. Everyone was sound asleep. Frustrated and scared, I grabbed the house phone to call the police. As I dialed, I heard movement outside again. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the yard, growing louder. I placed the phone down and crept toward the back door, heart in my throat. Slowly, I opened it just a crack and peered out into the night. The scarecrows weren't alone anymore. Two shadowy figures were walking through the field, heading toward the house. They were dressed in black, and from what I could see, they were carrying tools, hammers or crowbars. That's when it clicked. They weren't scarecrows at all. They were real people, disguised to look like scarecrows. I ran back upstairs and locked my bedroom door, my mind racing. Whoever these people were, they had used the scarecrows as a cover to get close to the house without raising suspicion. I was trapped in my room, with no idea what they were planning, but it couldn't be good. I grabbed my phone, quietly dialing 911. My voice trembled as I explained the situation to the operator, whispering so the intruders wouldn't hear me. She assured me that help was on the way, but it would take some time for the police to reach the house. Time I wasn't sure I had. I sat there, listening to the faint sound of footsteps outside the house, getting closer. I heard the creak of the back door. They were inside. I could hear them moving through the kitchen, quietly talking to each other. Panic surged through me. I wanted to scream, to wake up my family, but I was too scared that the intruders would hear me first. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash downstairs. One of them had knocked something over. The noise was enough to wake up my grandpa, and I heard him shout. I didn't know what was happening, but then there was more shouting. Uncle Tom's voice, Aunt Emily's screams. The commotion grew louder until finally I heard the distant wail of police sirens. I cautiously opened my door and crept downstairs. By the time I got there, the police had already arrived. The two intruders were pinned to the ground, handcuffed, and struggling as the officers dragged them outside. Grandpa stood in the kitchen, visibly shaken, holding a shotgun. Aunt Emily was comforting a crying Abby, while Uncle Tom was talking to the police. The truth came out soon after. The two men were petty thieves who had been casing farms in the area for weeks, looking for an easy score. They had dressed as scarecrows, that sneaking onto the property and hiding in plain sight during the day, waiting for the right moment to break in. They thought the scarecrow costumes would make them blend in, but something must have spooked them, and they tried to break in sooner than planned. The police took the two men away, and the farm returned to its usual calm. But the eerie image of those scarecrows waving at me in the moonlight stuck with me. For the rest of the weekend, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The scarecrows still stood in the field, but I never looked at them the same way again. It was a night I would never forget, a night when lifeless figures took on a new, terrifying meaning, and the farm I loved so much became the setting for a nightmare.